What's going on, guys? Welcome to Victims and Villains. If you guys are new to this channel, we are mental health through pop culture. My name is Captain Nostalgia, and I'm a writer, podcaster, and the director of our film festival, Horrific Hope. First festival is kind to be horror-centric and mental health focused, so if you have a screenplay, short film, or feature film, links are going to be in the descriptions below to submit them, and you have a few more weeks left. And shout out to our sponsors for this year's upcoming festival, Diabolical DVD, Fierce Literature, and Convicted Printing, all of which you guys can find links for in the show notes below, as well as where to find if you're interested to also submit. And down there also you'll find links to our all of our social media, Patreon, how to support us financially, podcasts, movie reviews like this, and most importantly, our mental health resource library. And nothing feels more like modern day pop culture than Avatar. I remember the first Avatar and how it exploded and erupted. It felt like I was in the middle of something really special. And I'll be honest, the first time I watched Avatar, I really wasn't a fan. And it wasn't until this past week that I kind of understood the hype a little bit better, rewatching it, and for Avatar, The Way of Water, which we're going to be talking about here today. Now, I am going to put this disclaimer out here. First off, I was not looking forward to this movie. I know I'm probably going to get a lot of hate in the comments below. Second off, these are just going to be my opinions on this movie. We're going to have a more of a rounded conversation when the podcast hits next week. And, well, let's jump into this. So The Weight of Water picks up kind of a few years after the events of the first Avatar. Jake and Tari have a family, and they're basically being hunted, and they move to a different tribe, which is an aquatic tribe, and learn to blend in, and the war, unfortunately, kind of brings it to their front door. I'm trying to be as, coy as possible when talking about the film, because I went into this film completely blind. I didn't watch any trailers. I knew the release date. I'd seen a couple images. That was all I had going in. So the fact that Jake now has a family, the fact that there are a few surprises in this movie that are connecting to the first movie, was a real surprise for me. So in turn, I'm going to do this as carefully as possible. First thing, while I'm on the topic of the first film, I love how this movie actually kind of pushes the narrative not only forward, but also pushes a little bit forward for the Stephen Lang character and the Sigourney Weaver character, and kind of how that ties into the actual narrative of this film. It makes the world feel like actually lived in, whereas you look at other movies like The Dark Knight, going into The Dark Knight Rises. Obviously, the Joker was a big part of that movie, and there's no mention of him in The Dark Knight Rises. And that's always kind of put a bitter taste in my mouth. I understand why he did that. I'm just using it as an example. But the fact that both Weaver and Lang are honored in this movie, I think it does a great justice to these characters and to the narrative and the world building aspect of this movie as a whole. I feel like my complaints for the first one is that it looked really appealing, but it was really empty. So it kind of felt like eating like a fancy dessert. It's where it looks easy on the eyes, but you still feel hungry afterwards. And while we'll talk about the visuals of this movie in a few minutes, I love how this movie actually feels not like that. This movie feels like it's bigger in scope, but also at the same time there's also this intimacy that James Cameron brings to these characters. The time in the narrative doesn't feel split like it does in the first one, where you're spending half the time with the Na'vi and then half the time with the humans. Whereas this one, you're fully immersed into this world, into their culture, into their ways. And that's something I really feel like this film does really well. Visually speaking, this movie is just as beautiful as the first film. I love that the opening shots of these are the Hallelujah Mountains, and like immediately you just feel immersed into the Navi. And even when we go into the aquatic Navi tribe, honestly I forget the technical name that they used. There's a lot that happens in this movie. It's almost 3.5 hours, so bear with me. Cameron has a way of making you feel immersed into the visuals as kind of like an extension of this world. And now I saw this movie in 3D, and I don't know if that's going to be the experience for everyone. It's a movie I recommend in 3D because this movie from a 3D standpoint doesn't feel gimmicky, but it actually feels like you're immersed within this world. I do love the way that this movie retains a lot of its intimacy, with even in feeling like it's a bigger world. And I think probably one of the biggest surprises of this movie is how the narrative actually shifts from Jake and Natari to their kids. In this movie, you spend a good deal of time with their kids and kind of the next generation. At one point, I literally was questioning whether or not Cameron was like setting this franchise up to be told through the kid's standpoint and kind of move away from Worthington and Saldana. But again, that's the brilliance of the script and the narrative is how they kind of take the reins of making you feel that way and tying it together in the end. I think this movie is definitely tied together a lot better. A lot of the issues that I felt like I had with the first film are definitely feel like they're fixed in this movie. All the performances of this movie are really well done, but I have to give it to Zoe Saldana. She absolutely steals the show, and I would say that this is a really exceptional performance for her, especially the third act of where her character goes. It's a very emotional roller coaster for her throughout the entirety of this film, and she just absolutely crushes every scene that she's in. While we're on the topic of the intimacy aspect of this movie, I really like the way that this movie ties together a lot of the strings from the first film with the Worthington and Saldana and Lang, and actually makes this a little bit more of an intimate feel and completely almost different in genre while still remaining in the same world that was created back in 2009. And what I mean by that is that at least in my opinion, the first film feels like a lot of it's fantasy driven, but also at the same time it also maintains this like almost 80s action aesthetic. And then you have this new film that retains that same fantasy but feels more modern, and then you have essentially almost like a revenge film at the core of this movie. And this revenge film like feels like it's done in the vein of like the first John Wick and Taken, to where it's like boom, it's like good guy versus bad guy, and it's really simple like that. But this world, there's so much that's going on, and that can be a little bit tiresome at times, and definitely a little bit too big for scope. But I think they tie together everything really well in the end. Alright, so before I keep talking, I am just going to go ahead and give this one a Rorschach rating scale. I have to say that this one really impressed me. I came in with really low expectations. I know, as a cinephile, this should have been one of my most anticipated movies this year. But I'm going to go ahead and give this one a 4 out of 5, and I feel like those low expectations made this film that much more effective for me. It's gorgeous. It's stunning. I can't wait to see what James Cameron does with 3, 4, and 5. And I have a definite more respect for this film. The performances are truly astonishing. Saldana, again, exceptional all the way through, and the intimacy that this movie maintains while also being really large in scope is just absolutely impeccable. Let's talk about mental health, shall we? If you guys are new to our content, Mental Health Moment is where we take a theme of mental health out of the film which we're talking about and talk about it for a few moments in hopes to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. If you guys have seen the first film, you know that for the way that the Navi greet each other is the phrase, "I see you." And one of the things that I definitely think is really important to talk about for this particular film is there's a moment in probably the last 20 minutes of this movie where Worthington is having a conversation with his son. So he has two sons. The first one is Nadim, and the second one is Loic. And Loic is kind of like the outcast of the family. He essentially spends the entirety of the movie kind of being reamed by dad or getting into trouble and kind of always being, well, the black sheep of the family. I know how that feels. I think there are some of us, maybe even a lot of us subscribed to this channel right now, or some of us that just happen to stumble upon this video that understand what it's like to be the black sheep. Or understand how depression makes you feel like you're not seen or not heard. You don't feel validated in your life because that's the very things that depression tells you is the actuality. And those three words, I see you, when you're going through those seasons, really do change your outlook on life. And I just want to just echo that to anyone currently watching this, just to say that you are seen. You are seen for your beauty. You are seen for your grace. You are seen for your value. You are seen for you as a person, as a creator, as an individual. You are seen, and your depression, whatever it's telling you, it's not real. It's lying to you. And I know that there are more people that are standing by that are willing to tell you the exact same thing. So in the links below, you guys will find links to our mental health resource library, and I strongly encourage you to check it out. If you're going through anything, struggling with suicide, addiction, depression, or self-harm, or any variation thereof, click the links in the descriptions below and just know that you are seen and that you are heard, and there are people that are standing by to currently see you and hear you and walk with you in this journey of healing. I really hope that's an encouragement to you. Avatar: The Way of Water is now playing in theaters everywhere. I strongly suggest checking it out in 3D. It's a pretty fun time. Make sure that you guys hit that subscribe button, and make sure you guys subscribe to us on our podcast, so when we drop our full-length episode on The Way of Water, you guys know it. You guys can come talk about the spoilers of this movie, because this video is really hard to do without spoilers. So make sure you guys check, and have a great weekend.